Good morning and good afternoon to our audience. So my name is Julia Roser. It is my really great pleasure to host this webinar jointly with my colleagues of Eurofins Techna. So today we will shortly review the state of the art of mycotoxins risk assessment, the analytical options and sampling challenges. We will then listen to some insights on how to evaluate and validate the screening test kits for mycotoxins. We will compare different approaches from different certifications and regulation bodies. And we will recommend how to monitor the performances of a kit in routine. And then we will see how to transfer the screening on automatic platform, which benefit you could have by selecting an adequate automatic analyzer, and which approach we do recommend for verifying the fitness for purpose of such automatic solutions. So let me thank in advance my colleagues Evelina, Julia, and Francesca for their efforts to arrange this presentation. We are all teammates since years in Eurofins Techna, that is the Italian Eurofins Technologies site. Eurofins Techna has around 25 years of experience in the mycotoxins field and keeps researching today screening solutions for mycotoxins detection in a variety of food and feed matrices. Before we start, I would like to remind you that you are all muted, but the chat box is open. So feel free to drop your comments and questions during the presentation. We will read, I believe, as many as we can at the end of each section. So let me introduce my colleague Evelina Parisi, PhD, that is our sales account and marketing expert. She draws her knowledge on mycotoxins from the collaboration she carried out at the Institute of Science of Food Production of National Research Council in Bari, that is the public reference center in Italy in the mycotoxins area. She will provide us a general introduction on mycotoxins, sampling, and analysis. Evelina, the stage is yours.
So thank you, Julia, for the nice introduction, and thank you to our audience to join us today. I will enter straight forward my presentation. So, as you all know, mycotoxins are toxic compounds that are naturally produced by certain types of mold fungi. Molds that can produce mycotoxins grow on numerous foodstuffs such as cereals, dried fruits, nuts, and spices. The effects of some foodborne mycotoxins are acute, with symptoms of severe illness appearing quickly after consumption of food products contaminated with mycotoxins. Other mycotoxins occurring in foods have been linked to long-term effects on health, including the induction of cancers and immune deficiency. Of the several hundred mycotoxins identified so far, the most commonly observed mycotoxin that present a concern to human health, pets, and livestock includes aflatoxins, deoxynivalenol, fumonisins, zearalenol, T2 and HT2 toxins, and ochratoxins. Mycotoxins appear in the food chain as a result of mold infections of crops, both before and after harvest. Exposure to mycotoxins can happen either directly by eating infected food or indirectly from animals that are fed contaminated feed. And animal species could be differently affected from that. Large doses of aflatoxins can lead to acute poisonings, aflatoxicosis, and can be life-threatening, usually through damage to the liver. Aflatoxins have also been shown to be genotoxins, meaning they can damage DNA and cause cancer in animal species. There is also evidence that they can cause liver cancers in humans. In particular, we have the example of contaminated milk from aflatoxins M1 due to the conversion to this more hydrophilic toxin, starting from the ingestion from cows of aflatoxin B1 contaminated feed. Trichotensins can be acutely toxic to humans, causing rapid irritation to the skin or intestinal mucosa and lead to diarrhea. Reported chronic effects in animals include suppressions of the immune system. Zearalenone has been shown to have hormonal estrogenic effects and can cause infertility at high intake levels, particularly in pigs. Fumonisins have been related to esophageal cancer in humans and to liver and kidney toxicity in animals. Ochratoxin A is formed during the storage of crops and is known to cause a number of toxic effects in animal species. The most sensitive and notable effect is kidney damage, but the toxins may also have effects on fetal development and on the immune system. Contrary to clear evidence of kidney toxicity and kidney cancer due to ochratoxin A exposure in animals, this association in humans is unclear. However, effects on kidney have been demonstrated. Mold growth can occur either before harvest or after harvest, during storage or in the food itself, often under warm, damp, and humid conditions are reported in this slide. Still, throw may be eventually help mold growth and mycotoxins production, as under dry conditions plants have reduced the defense mechanism. Most mycotoxins are chemically stable and survive food processing. What we learn from this very graph is that same fungi tolerate a wide spectrum of temperatures. Also, we learn here that they can produce not only one, but a patterns of toxins, including also some metabolites and modified forms that could contribute to the overall toxicity of the contaminated materials. It is good to keep this in mind to have an adequate risk assessment plan in place for routine controls, as usually the risk is not related to one single compound. Here we report in which matrices it is most common to find which particular mycotoxins and to what degree of risk. Regarding the aflatoxins, crops that are frequently affected by Aspergillus include cereals, corn, sorghum, wheat, and rice, oilseeds, soybean, peanuts, sunflower, cotton seeds, spices as chili peppers, black pepper, and so on, and tree nuts, pistachio, almonds, walnut. And as we already mentioned, the toxin can also be found in the milk of animals that are feed contaminated feed in the form of aflatoxins M1. Different fusarium toxins are associated with certain types of cereal. For example, both DON and ZIA are often associated with T2 and H2 toxins with oats, and fumonisins with maize corn. Ochratoxins contamination is possible in food commodities, such as cereals and cereal products, coffee beans, dry ripe fruits, wine, and grape juice, spices, and licorice, occurs worldwide. Regulation relating to mycotoxins have been established in many countries to protect consumers from the harmful effects of these compounds. Different factors play a role in the decision-making process of setting limits for mycotoxins. These include scientific factors, for example, the availability of toxicological data and occurrence data, detailed knowledge about possibilities for sampling and analysis, and socioeconomic issues. By the end of 2003, approximately 100 countries, covering the 85% of the world inhabitants, had specific regulation or detailed guidelines for mycotoxins in food. Here are reported some specifically examples of EU aflatoxin regulation, which the indication of the regulations currently in force. The limit for the aflatoxins B1 and total aflatoxins expressed in ppb, parts per billion, usually used as unit to measure the concentration of the contaminant. In these cases, case 1 ppb equals to 1 microgram of substance per kilo of solids. The requirement to apply these regulatory limits has prompted the development of a vast number of actors who are playing a fundamental role, although at different levels, searching for the toxins, using proper analytical methods for the identification and quantification of mycotoxins in various samples, such as food, feed, and other biological matrices. In this context, we can meet the governmental laboratories, which are acting as official control bodies, cereal, spices, fruits producers, together with food feed producers and traders, and last but not least, service laboratories. Government laboratories, producers, and traders are performing the analysis and lots of specific matrices, while a third-party laboratory examines samples. The purpose of the control from official laboratories are concerning the public, animal health, and of course the compliance to regulations. The purpose of the analysis made from the producers and traders always implicates the animal health and the compliance to regulation. Moreover, they could be performed to peculiar customer requests. In the last case, the activities of service laboratories, they operate exclusively on customer requests related to specific analysis on samples. The analytical workflow to determine which lead to the quantification of mycotoxins levels starts from the sampling step. Sampling plays a crucial part in the reliability of the whole process. The sample collection must ensure the representability of the whole batch, whose contamination is often very uneven. It is therefore dramatically important not to adopt shortcuts in the sampling phase, not to compromise the whole analysis. After sample collection, the material must be prepared, that means ground and homogenized. The analysis is finally conducted on one laboratory aliquot, and the error introduced in this very stage is usually less relevant than those caused by a non-adequate sampling, approximate grinding, or insufficient homogenization. The need to obtain a representative sample deserves particular consideration, since a wrong sampling plan can greatly affect the reliability of the measured level of mycotoxins. This can even result in legal disputes and barriers to trade. From the original batch, an adequate number of incremental samples must be collected and combined. From the original batch, an adequate number of incremental samples must be collected and combined in an aggregate sample that is much bigger than the test portion, the few grams used for testing. Splitting this step is a risk. Indeed, considering the uneven distribution of mycotoxins, particularly fumonisin and aflatoxins. Depending on the analytical scope, sampling can be static or dynamic. If the analysis is run to authorize the batch, a load from a truck or other vehicle, then the option should be a static approach on the batch, that is still on the truck by means of a probe. If the analysis is run on material that is moving, then natural unload can be used for collecting representative incremental samples at defined time intervals. How many samples should be then collected to minimize the risk of false unreliable results? The European Commission have laid down the official procedures for sampling foodstuff for mycotoxins analysis for enforcement purposes. These procedures are described in Commission Regulation 401 of 2006 and amended by Commission's Regulation 188 of 2010 and 519 of 2014. The Commission has provided additional information to officers carrying out sampling official controls for aflatoxins in a specific guidance document, but these guidelines are useful to everyone performing mycotoxins analysis. These documents provide information on sampling of lot weights minor of 15 tons for dried fruits, nuts, spices, coffee, and sampling of lot weights major of 50 tons for cereals and products derived from nuts and dried figs. Here in tables, you can find the indicated number of incremental samples needed and the aggregate sample weights to be taken depending on the weight of the lot of cereals and cereals products. Moreover, for lot weights above this amount, it is also possible to refer to the regulation for sampling guidance. Since the laboratory analysis is finally performed on a small aliquots, generally 5 to 50 grams, of the bulk sample, it is necessary to ensure an adequate homogenization to the whole aggregate sample. The effectiveness of homogenization by grinding is closely related to the sample particle size and grinding procedure that can be dry or with liquid in the slurry practice. Here we are reporting a study made by the Italian Istituto Superiore di Sanità on a corn material. In the project, kernels, rough ground flour, fine flour, and slurry were used to prepare the same sample. From each of these options, 10 subsamples were analyzed for the aflatoxin content by applying a multi-mycotoxin method with UPLC MS detection. The results obtained showed that the variability of the concentration of the mycotoxin examined was strictly dependent on the different grain sizes of the sample from which they were taken. A completely wrong result is obtained by kernel analysis with an acceptable standard deviation. But what is interesting is that also the second option led to almost unacceptable results. Only the fine grinding and the slurry gave comparable average results with acceptable CV. The chemical diversity of mycotoxin and their varying concentration ranges in a wide range of agricultural commodities, foods, and biological samples poses a great challenge to analytical chemists. To determine their presence, the analysis can be managed with chromatographic techniques that usually imply a consistent investment in training and equipment, turning to be not accessible for production monitoring plans. Alternatively, rapid methods are widespread in the industries for the ease of use and short time to results, while the contamination characterization is usually not possible. The use of biosensors in the food industry can contribute to reducing the presence of mycotoxins by providing significant benefits such as fast, easy, and inexpensive sample analysis, reproducibility, stability, accuracy, and on-site testing of samples. The transducers are mainly used for mycotoxin detection are electrochemical, optical, and piezoelectric. Common recognition elements are peptides, enzymes, antibodies, cells, and nucleic acids, but other materials such as aptamers or molecular imprinted polymers may also be used. A non-comprehensive but definitely exciting list of emerging technologies include molecular techniques, imaging, and home-AIC approaches. Still, these methods are more at a research stage and cannot be easily implemented in routine environments. Most of the rapid techniques are immune-based and exploit antibodies' capacity to specifically bind one target or a family of closely related molecules. Such kind of tests often have the advantage of not requiring any cleanup or analyte enrichment steps. ELISAs have become routinely used tools for rapid monitoring of most mycotoxins, especially for the screening of raw material. The advantages of the microtiter plate format are speed, ease of operation, sensitivity, and high sample through, which contributes to make ELISA tests commercially available of most of the measured mycotoxins. Other example of microchemical assays besides ELISA involves dipsticks, flow-through membrane, and lateral flow devices. Dipstick has a similar principle of operation to that of ELISA, and flow-through membrane-based immunoassays provide qualitative and semi-quantitative determination of mycotoxins on one-step strip tests within a few minutes. Over years, interest in rapid membrane-based immunoassay methods has strongly increased to the need for a rapid on-site pre-screening. Such lateral flow devices have been developed for selected mycotoxins, and strong interest is furthermore reflected in the increasing number of commercially available test kits for field use. based mostly on direct competitive assay. Because many of their results are approaching the cutoff level, all these immunoassays not always present excellent performance. Lateral flow devices, also named immunostrips or immunodipsticks, are fast in situ screening tools for immunochromatographic tests that works in a competitive way, having labeled antibodies as signal reagents and working as pregnancy tests. The results from these tests are positive or negative and come from visual evaluation. Portable photometric strips readers can also be used for obtaining results. Signal amplification in lateral flow has been achieved through novel materials such as quantum dots, gold nanoparticles, or magnetic nanoparticles. Although this method has great advantages, a major reason for limited use is related with the interferences they can cause. Their limited application is linked with reproducibility, reliability with different metrics and sensitivity. In particular, here is reported a schematic representation for a healthy bee for mycotoxins research. Mycotoxins are extracted from vegetables with an adequate solution, a solvent, or a water-based solution. Then the extract could be premixed with the capture reagent, common an antibody, coupled to a tracer, or directly added on a ready-to-use dried pet. Test line is typically a mycotoxin competitor, coupled to a protein and dried. The control line is typically a generic binder capturing the leftover labeled antibody that overcomes the T line. The test line intensity will be inversely proportional to the concentration of mycotoxin in the sample. The control line intensity could also be affected by the contamination. Different algorithms can be used to correlate the line intensities to the sample concentration by the means of a reader. Helasa methods for mycotoxins analysis have been commercially available for around 30 years. The technology is based again on the ability of a specific antibody to distinguish the three-dimensional structures of a specific mycotoxins. The direct competitive ELISA is commonly used in mycotoxins analysis. A conventional microtiter plate ELISA requires equilibrium of the antibody-antigen reaction that would require an incubation time approximately of 1-2 hours. Currently, most of the commercial available ELISA test kits for mycotoxins are working in the kinetics phase of antibody-antigen binding, which reduce the incubation time to minutes. Although reduction of incubation time may lead to some loss of assay sensitivity, the test kit can provide accurate and reproducible results. A typical principle of direct competitive ELISA is shown in the figure. After a mycotoxins is extracted from a ground sample with solvent, a portion of the sample extracts and a conjugate of an enzyme-coupled mycotoxins are mixed and then added to the antibody-coated microteter wells. Any mycotoxins in the sample extract or control standards is allowed to compete with the enzyme conjugate mycotoxins for the antibody binding sites. After washing, an enzyme substrate is added and blue color develops. The intensity of the color is inversely proportional to the concentration of mycotoxins in the sample or standard. A solution is then added to stop the enzyme reaction. The intensity of the solution color in the microteter wells is measured optically using an ELISA reader with an absorbance filter of 450 nanometers. The optical density of the sample are compared to the ones of the standards and an interpretative result is determined. Indeed, the mycotoxins are extracted from the vegetables with the adequate solution. Depending on the assay design, the extracted can be mixed with the competitor prior being transferred in the reaction well. Free mycotoxin and enzyme-complex mycotoxin compete for the binding site of the antibody absorbed on the wells. The quantity of conjugate that remains in the solid phase is then detected through the addition of a colorless substrate. In one ELISA assay, calibrators are often required to be run in dedicated wells. Indeed, the color intensity is typically rationalized versus the maximum signal. Sample concentration is at the end calculated through interpolation of the curve. The ELISA technique can be declined to serve specific needs and to enhance certain benefits. In Eurofins technologies, we currently offer 4 lines of assays with specific tailored advantages. The B0 line, which includes master curve calibrated ELISA kits with fast results. The Lateral line, which includes our fast ELISA kits with validated protocols for automation. The water-based line, our ELISA line in which the extraction step is oven-free, always with fast results, and the ice cream line. Our ELISA line with the highest sensitivity and also validated protocols for the automation. What do we care about in Eurofins technologies? Our goal is to find a clever, reliable, smart, and sustainable solution for routine needs of end users. We know how heavy can be the analytical workflow and how important it is to rationalize the expense and the time. We are able to offer multiple kit formats to satisfy small and big laboratories, peak and off-peak needs, and most of them are not on demand. That means that they are always on stock available. We have invested in the sample preparation simplification. For mycotoxin in vegetables, we have ensured an option for done in methanol, so that the same extract can be run on the whole B0 and cellular line. For aflatoxin M1, we have removed any sample manipulation to allow direct analysis of raw milk with its natural fat contents. Last but not least, most of our solutions are ready to be run in the corporate automatic analyzer with validated turnkey protocols. We will learn more later on during the presentation from my colleagues. So now I have finished my speech, and if I wonder if there are any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Evelina, for your very clear presentation. So far, I don't see questions in the chat box, and so I would recommend to move on the second topic of this presentation. If any comments will raise or questions or doubts, please write in the chat box your requests, your questions, so we can read also later on.
So yes, Julia, thanks. And now indeed, it's now my turn to introduce you. The next chapter of this webinar will deal about evaluation and validation of screening test kits for mycotoxins. Julia Rosa has joined Eurofins Tecna more than 13 years ago, has a background as a researcher and a deep knowledge in developing reagents for immune-based assays for mycotoxins. She is now covering the role as a senior product manager for mycotoxins and veterinary drug residues in Eurofins Technologies. Julia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Evelina. So we have learned that there is a huge list of analytical techniques available and the state of the art for mycotoxins monitoring. And they have different degree of complexity, quality, reliability, cost, and accessibility in the end. So thinking to the food and feed production chain, what should the analytical goal be? So the very first basic, unquestionable function of any analytical tool, any type of screening test kit, is to allow a proper classification of batches as compliant and non-compliant. Compliant to what? To regulation, for sure, but also to internal quality standards, for instance, that could have been set for satisfying specific customers or specific processes. If conformity is given on the basis of regulatory limits, misclassification of lots could lead to 2 different risks. So if a compliant sample is detected as non-compliant with a so-called false positive result, there is no real risk for human or animal health. The issue is economical, as the batch owner could be led to destroy a good batch or to spend for further investigations, anyway, with consequent expense of time and money at least. On the contrary, a false negative result is a danger for consumers, both human and animals, because contaminated, toxic materials are allowed to proceed in the production and distribution chain. And this is the highest risk for screening, because reasonably, very rarely confirmation is run with chromatographic techniques on a purient blank or compliant results. So when evaluating a screening tool for routing implementation, it is important to measure the risk of false positive results and the percentage of false compliant data obtained from contaminated non-compliant samples. But I would say that qualitative analysis is not sufficient. The food and feed chain need screening tools capable not only to identify with low misclassification risk compliant and non-compliant batches. They need a quantification of the contamination, also from screening. Knowing from the screening the concentration of the toxins, even if below the regulatory limit, could support the definition of adequate sorting and cleaning approaches, for instance. On the higher is the accuracy of a screening test, the better it is on routine basis, very simply. So we have introduced very roughly the concept of accuracy. That is the capacity of an analytical method to measure the analyte closely to its true value. Let's call it so. We need to say that this is not the only important parameter to take into account when evaluating a kit. Specificity, selectivity, sensitivity are concepts closely related to the false positive and false negative ratio of a method. They are concepts that express how specifically the system detects the analyte we are interested to only, with no interference from the matrix of irrelevant congeners, molecules that we do not want to measure, and how little concentration the kit is able to determine as positive to discriminate consistently from blanks. The precision. Precision is the degree of agreement among individual test results. It is a mandatory requirement for any analytical method, more important than accuracy, probably. I would say that a systematic overestimation could be indeed managed somehow and predicted if it is well characterized, but the random behavior, leading to scattered, unpredictable results, well, that's hard to handle. And then there is a huge list here in the slide of parameters to analyze and prioritize before starting any practical evaluation of a novel test kit or a novel technology or whatever. Each company, in my vision, each laboratory, each quality team could rate these parameters under different logics. So if we think to a small environment, with a few technicians, limited training, so then ease of use, throughput flexibility, and availability of single determination assays, support from the certification, or at least having the validation data collected from the producers are really relevant aspects. And probably they have to be combined with the overall cost. Ease of use, time to result are the key aspects despite the company size when thinking to the goods acceptance process. As there, the hurry of releasing or rejecting a track, for instance, is consistent. On the contrary, a huge company analyzing several samples for several parameters, not only mycotoxins, maybe, glyphosate or other compounds, could positively evaluate automation as an option to reduce the operator-related bias and personal turnover. And they could evaluate also other aspects intrinsic from the supplier, like logistics, assistance, worldwide presence. But at the same time, a well-equipped and organized laboratory could not be scared by the need to implement a new validation themselves. I mean, they have this capacity. So there is therefore not one unique product that fits all the needs around the world. It is important to give a rate to such non-comprehensive list of criteria prior starting any evaluation phase. So having in mind what is important to us and what is our analytical goal, we need to collect some key information regarding commercially available products to learn how to read and understand them. Here in this picture, there is a real extract of three instructions of 3 different ELISA kits for aflatoxins. These kits exist, on the market. What should we think about them? Which one should we select for our analysis? So it could look from the calibrators, from calibrators concentration that the kit A, the blue one, is the most sensitive. But let us pay attention and investigate a little bit more. There is a discrepancy in the LOD reported and the first calibrator. This is because the calibrator's concentration here do not take into account the sample dilution factor. So it is true that the antibody is able to detect a 0.05 nanogram of AFLA per milliliter in solution, but the LOD in matrix is 10 times higher. And furthermore, the LOQ, the limit of quantification for maize, is reportedly 2 ppb. And this is a relevant information indeed, definitely more than the LOD, the first standard. So let us compare the cross-reactivity pattern. The B kit, the yellow one, that seems to be, let's say, the worst in terms of sensitivity, is capable to consistently detect all the 4 regulated aflatoxins with cross-reactivity higher than 75%, and turns then to be the first choice when it comes the time to analyze the total aflatoxins. On the contrary, the kit C shows very little interference from aflatoxins B2, G1, and G2, and then turns to be a better tool for aflatoxin B1 specific analysis. We can see also that it is in this red kit, the C kit, the calibrator's concentration already considered the dilution factor. The LOD, the limit of detection, the limit of quantification LOQ are the same at 1 ppb. So again, which is the best kit? Probably not the A. If for any reason it is not the most cost efficient or the fastest option. B is sensitive enough to meet the European regulation for total aflatoxins, and it detects for real total aflatoxins, while C is excellent, is perfect for aflatoxin B1 specific analysis that is requested in the European Union and also in China, for instance. So when it comes to time to evaluate several commercially available offers, take your time to collect all the technical documents. Ask the suppliers the information you need on, for instance, applied calculations, how they validated the specifications, their validation data, and then you can make an adequate comparison. Is there one single validation approach then for mycotoxin screenings that you can expect from producers and then you can apply in your laboratory? Definitely not. For the following discussion, I have decided to compare one international guideline to the scopes and approaches of two famous certification bodies to highlight common points and differences. So the first one, that is very famous and widely adopted for mycotoxins producers, is the FGIS from the United States Department of Agriculture. Here, very specific and well-described protocols are public on their website and define what to measure, how to measure, and the acceptance criteria for each measurement. A kit producer that aims to get the FGIS approval must submit a report with data following their precise indication and then pass their inspection. For each toxin, there is 1 or 2 mandatory matrices to be submitted compulsorily, and these are the only matrices to be subjected to external verification from FGIS personnel. And then there is a list of other additional matrices that can be furtherly certified just with data submission from the applicant. A customer that uses an FGIS approved method knows that strictly following the approved procedure for certified matrices, the performances are supposed to be compliant to those FGIS criteria. The European Union released in 2014 the first guideline for the validation of screening methods for mycotoxins, focusing on one very simple analytical goal: the capacity of the method to discriminate samples below and above a certain threshold that is called screening target concentration. This is not a fixed value, could be the regulatory level or not. It is a target concentration defined by the laboratory, by the end user, who is committed then to define if the selected method is able to respond adequately by analyzing a variety of different independent samples. And lastly, we have the OAC research institutes that deserve to be mentioned, as they also provide third parties approval to analytical methods. The validation protocol developed by AOAC is customized and reflects specifically the claims of the applicant, so it is not standard as the one of FGIS. But usually it includes the characterization and discussion of some certain aspects, let's say some milestones, including calibration assessment, selectivity, sensitivity, specificity, accuracy, precision, consistency, and robustness. And most of the experiments are in the hands of the applicant, while a sort of confirmation is demanded to an external independent entity that is not a UAC. So let us analyze a little more the FGIS approach. For each mycotoxin, FGIS lists a very precise protocol with following chapters you see here: how to grind the sample, how to store the sample, how to prepare the reference materials and standard solutions for the certifications, which are the analytical conditions, how to arrange it, how they are supposed to be, the kit instructions, how to handle different procedures for sample preparation. And look, every option, every preparation must get a dedicated package of data if they want to be certified. There is no room for alternatives or unspecified steps. So you can do this or you can do that. No, every procedure must have its own certification. Then FGIS says, which is the maximum tolerated assay time, including sample preparation, that is 30 minutes, including the reanalysis of out-of-range dilution samples and including sample preparation. Also, how many figures to display, how to determine the accuracy, how to discard and dispose the hazardous materials, how to characterize the sensitivity of the reading system to the electromagnetic fields, how to demonstrate the sensitivity temperature, how to determine the shelf life, and also how FGIS people are going to confirm the performances once the report is received from the applicant. Some few comments. The FGIS certifications applies per matrix coupled to a specific protocol, combined to a kit, obviously, and a defined reader. And this applies both to the lateral flow test strips and the ELISA kits. It must be certified in combination to a specific reader. Second comment, already mentioned, for each toxin, FGIS identifies one mandatory or two mandatory matrices to be validated by both the applicant and FGIS, and a list of optional commodities that can be certified without being revised by FGIS, only submitting a report. These are important aspects to consider when evaluating one FGIS approved kit versus one that is not. And what about applying an in-house validation protocol of kits inspired to this guideline? The accuracy, that is also in bold here, the accuracy aspect is the main aspect of the FGIS certification. FGIS provide a very well-defined list of concentration given for each mycotoxin you see here for alpha and down. And the applicant is required to collect the reference materials at these given levels with a minimum tolerance that is reported here for the assigned concentration. No spiking experiments are permitted, neither the shift from these given values to others. It means that 4 reference samples must be gathered and run in a number of replicates, and of those replicates, 95% must be compliant to these given specifications in terms of precision and in terms of accuracy. Are these range fit for your needs? This is something you have to decide. So taking the aflatoxins protocol as an example, the applicant is supposed to collect 21 replicates for each level. So 21 determination for each of the 4 samples by involving 3 different operators and 3 kit lots under blind conditions. Each operator must run 7 measurements, and 1/21 could be out of the permitted range of accuracy. This exercise must be repeated for each of the matrices and each of the protocols. And this is also going to be repeated by FGIS technicians once they get the adequate training from the applicant for the mandatory matrices only. This way, the precision and the trueness of the products are measured jointly to the lot-to-lot consistency. The overall expense of this validation in the end for such kind of exercise is 4 samples on 3 lots. It is possible to apply for extended measuring range as well with lower limit of detection and higher upper limit. But this is not a common practice among kit producers, I have to say. From a customer perspective, the FGIS does not highlight what? The matrix effect and the sensitivity of the assay that could be eventually below the prescribed concentration from FGIS. And similarly, these aspects could be missed in one FGIS-oriented internal validation protocol. On the contrary, the European Union brings back the screening concept to the basic capacity of the method to discriminate samples at a certain desired level. The screening target concentration is a level decided by the laboratory, and the fit-for-purpose screening method should classify with 95% confidence the samples as negative or suspect. The aim of the validation is then to demonstrate the fitness of purpose of the screening method selected. This is done by determining the cutoff value and the false negative and false suspect rate. For this scope, a minimum of 20 homogeneous negative control samples and 20 positive controls at the screening target concentration are needed to be tested under intermediate reproducibility conditions. The cutoff is then determined using the mean response of positive samples plus a certain value of standard deviations. So the European Union regulation is emphasizing the use of different materials, not to repeat 20 measurements of one single blank sample. Different and dependent materials are expected, obviously, to have higher genuine variability, and the standard deviation is expected to be realistically scattered compared to the variability of one sample that I repeat, in several replicates. In this graph, you can see an example of the distribution of the response of positive controls in light blue, their mean value, that is in orange, the calculated cutoff in blue, and then in green how the blank materials are for real below this cutoff value. What if the method we select for our internal use has already been validated through a collaborative trial? Then the laboratory can really downsize its effort and reduce the experiments to the confirmation of the fitness of purpose by means of 6 materials only. Never it is permitted to reduce this quantity or use one single sample. Also, for the quality monitoring, it is recommended to keep 2 positive control samples in routine and to recalculate the cutoff once per year. So we already seen 2 different approaches. Finally, let us have a look at the certification path through a UAC. It is pretty customized, but usually it includes some milestones like the calibration study, the selectivity discussion, the metric study. I think you can click. Something has blocked. Sorry. Thank you. So calibration study, selectivity discussion, matrix study, the lot-to-lot consistency and stability, a robustness study, and finally, it includes the independent study. Most of the experiments of the metric study are addressed to the applicant, who must demonstrate the repeatability, accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity of the method. And there is a dedicated work package that is addressed to the independent laboratory that is engaged for the project. As in this case, a general protocol is not available, we will follow an extraction, not the whole certification path, of the validation outline and results collected by us, by Eurofins Tecna, for the approval that we got for ice cream aflame 1 milk. It is an ELISA kit for the analysis of aflatoxin M1 in raw bovine milk that can be analyzed with and without its natural content of fat, freshly collected or stabilized with preservatives, and also milk powder. So let us take just milk as a matrix. Tecna had 4 protocols available, and AOAC asked us to defend them all separately to demonstrate the performances individually. We ran the metric study in Tecna involving 2 operators and using 2 readers. Milk samples were spiked at 5 different levels and run in 5 replicates each under blind analysis condition. Concentration were agreed by us and the UAC to cover the whole kit dynamic range. Milk was tested following all the options, the preparation, let's say, that we have in our manual. That means as whole and skim, fresh and stabilized milk. We obtained under all conditions comparable and satisfactory results, as you can see in the tables. Why didn't we use reference materials? Because all the control and reference materials available are powdered. And so far, for liquid real milk, as it is in routine, we agreed with AOAC to go for spiking experiments. But it is possible that in other conditions, the validation outline is adjusted and adequate to the conditions, to the availability of materials. This approach studies the repeatability and accuracy, but does not enhance the matrix variability until it remains in the laboratory of the applicant. But data for raw whole milk, fresh and stabilized, were confirmed in the study by an independent laboratory. And for our specific project, we selected a QLA laboratory in the US. This laboratory we never met before, we shared nothing but the kits. And that means that their data were collected on their milk, local, fresh, American samples. This is, in my opinion, really good, really challenging, and it is supportive to the demonstration of the applicability of the kit in different conditions and on different samples. Again, we followed all the 4 protocols to verify their interchangeability in terms of performances and validated the LOD and LOQ with these given formulas, with the limit of detection calculated as the mean response of one material blank plus 3 standard deviation, and the limit of quantification as mean response of blank plus 10 standard deviation. And these formulas were recommended by AOAC. And finally, we went also for the confirmation of the estimated LOQ by spiking a milk close to the calculated concentration. So you see in the table that despite the protocol adopted, where the results were equal one series to the other, LOD was calculated to be around 3.5 ppt, and LOQ was around 5. We confirmed with spiking, and all results were detected consistently by the assay as positive. Despite the fact that this protocol implies again to use one single material, you see how different is this approach from the European Union one. And we worked on the repeatability condition. We were able to confirm the results with the support again of the independent laboratory, who worked again on 2 protocols with their local milk and had fully comparable results. So what? We saw 3 different approaches. One is focusing on the accuracy and precision at given concentrations that are fixed. One is focusing, the European one, on false positive and false negative ratio at the definition of the fit for purpose cutoff. And the loss is more flexible as it aims to defend specific claims. Questions. Is that important to rely on several samples? Is that fine to use one only, spiked at different levels? Is that acceptable and realistic to go for spiking experiments? It is recommended to use reference materials only. Eurofins Techna, we have been doing research on mycotoxin screening test kits since late 90s. We have our own internal approach that combines what we do believe is the best to have a clear vision of the kit's performances and matrices. So for every kit, we do the calibration study to define an adequate, linear, accurate range. We then determine the selectivity of the antibody, both without and with matrices by doing spikings. We ran some accelerated and real-time stability study to access the shelf life of the product. We verified the robustness of the kit to temperature simulating traveling conditions. And then the ruggedness of the assay to some small, reasonable, realistic protocol modifications that could really happen during manual implementation, like, I don't know, temperature deviation during the assay implementation, a mistake on the pipetted volume, or a modification of the incubation time that could be realistic. And finally, for each matrix, we conduct a matrix study. We like to follow the European guideline and try to gather as many blank materials as we can, ideally 20. In our opinion, this gives a realistic picture of how challenging and variable is a matrix. Having the specificity assessment on one single sample under repeatability or eventually intermediate reproducibility would pose a risk to us to have a too conservative standard deviation and a non-realistic cutoff value that then does not apply to routine of our customers. The same blank materials usually are used for spiking experiments to determine the limit of quantification. We honestly inherited this approach from the European guideline that was in place for the validation of screening kits for drug residues and food from animal origin. This guideline preceded the one for mycotoxins and was in place for more time. We first verified the rate of first compliant result and the capacity of the system to consistently quantify the analyte at the desired level. If available, obviously, we like to confirm the LOQ on really naturally contaminated materials. We believe that the accuracy and precision should be defined by means of naturally encouraged certified reference materials at different concentration, ideally 4 at least, as recommended by FGIS, in order to cover the whole dynamic range. But such kind of samples are not always available and can be therefore substituted when it's not possible to find such kind of materials with some naturally contaminated materials whose concentration has been given with a chromatographic method. And spiking experiments are left as the last option in case natural materials that have also metabolites are not available for any reason. We are aware that this approach is sometimes challenging because a number of samples must be gathered and characterized. But I would say that at the same time, it provides a realistic indication of the method performances. We do believe that at the customer side, a downscale could be accepted, especially for certain easier, let's say, matrices like simple grains, where inter-sample variability could be reasonably considered limited. But obviously, once more, it depends on the scope of the analysis, whether it is an internal monitoring, a service, whatever, just local jurisdiction and materials availability.
So, thank you, Julia, for your complete and detailed presentation. At the moment, we don't have questions regarding this part, but of course, we encourage you to write on our chat box, and we will check again before to close this webinar. So thank you, Julia. Now we move with the next portion of the presentation, Hence, I am giving the control to my colleague for manage air contribution. Giulia Runti, PhD, has joined Eurofins Tecna 5 years ago in the research department and worked mostly on validation and automation of ELISA methods. Her interest to regulatory aspects has drove her in our technical assistance team as the domestic market tender manager. Her talk will deal with routine quality verifications of a kit. Giulia, you can start when you are ready.
Thank you, Evelina. I think you might see the screen in a few seconds.
Yes, perfect. When you're ready.
So thank you for your nice presentation. In the second part of this webinar, we will see, once that you have evaluated and validated your selected kit, how to monitor the quality of your analytical sessions in the routine of your laboratory. So we will have a word about the two tools that we have, the internal quality control and the external quality assurance. So once that you have evaluated and validated following the European guidelines, for example, your kit, then you are on the route towards routine. At this stage, it's very important to have to plan a quality verification program to verify the performances of your kit over time, taking into account uncertainty, stability, and consistency of the method, but also the capacity of the analyst to catch aberrant sessions. In this respect, the first thing that the analyst has to do is specifically to evaluate the compliancy of the analytical session to the given assay specifications. In this slide, you can see on the left an example of a calibration curve. So what the analyst will have to do first will be to have a visual, let's say a visual inspection of the calibration curve, evaluating the positioning and also the shape of the calibration curve. So he will have to compare the obtained curve with that proposed on the instruction booklet. Then he will have to evaluate whether the obtained parameters in terms of absorbance of the standard zero, B over B0 50%, and coefficient of variation are meet the assay specification. So in particular, the absorbance of the standard zero should be higher or equal to 0.7. The B over B0 50% should be within the given specification range. And the mean coefficient of variation of the standard duplicates should be less or equal to 6%. A verification of the session compliancy can and should be done also for those kits that don't have a calibration curve. As Evelina was mentioning in the first part of the webinar, we also offer some kits that don't have a calibration curve or have, let's say, a virtual calibration curve, a virtual master curve. So for those kits, it's also possible to verify the compliancy in terms of standard zero absorbance, as you can see here. So then another very useful tool is the certificate of analysis. This is a document which is always present in every kit box and can be used also to compare the results obtained by the analyst with those obtained at the production site at the release of the kit batch. This is an example of a certificate of analysis for our iScreen line of kits. As you can see here, this is quite detailed, let's say, because you have the three values obtained in 3 different analytical sessions for the standard 0. And you also have the values of the B over B0 50% and the coefficient of variation of the standard duplicates. And here on the right, you have the specifications. So this is a useful tool to guide you in understanding whether your session is actually compliant with the specification. And also for the ice cream line, we usually report also the results of reference material tested during the batch release. And this is also a very useful tool in terms of evaluation of the recoveries, for example. So if you have a reference or a control material you are testing with this kit batch, for example, you have the opportunity to compare your recoveries with those obtained at the batch release with this other reference material, for instance. And this is another example of another certificate of analysis of the seller line of products. In this case, we usually report some information about the different kit components. So you can see here that some of them are lot specific, while some others, some reagents such as the washing buffer, the developing solution, and the stop solution can be replaced from another batch. So they are not kit specific. We also report the B over B0 values for the standard point and the average absorbances for each standard. And again, also the B over B0 50%. So this comparison between your results and those reported on the certificate of analysis can be very useful, can help the analyst in evaluating the session compliancy. However, don't worry if your numbers are not perfectly matching at the single number those reported in the certificate of analysis, because you have to keep in mind that it's normal that the reagents of your kit will get older over time. So it's normal, it's perfectly normal that the absorbances might show a slight decrease over time. So the absorbances might not be exactly the same as those reported at the time 0, let's say, at the time of the batch release. However, as far as your kit specifications are met in terms of absorbance of the standard 0, B over B0 50% value, and CV of the standard duplicates, as far as these specifications are met, you can trust your analysis. So once that you have done this control of the kit specifications, the next tool that you have to monitor your routine is the internal quality control. To do this, you have to choose a reference or a control material to use regularly during your analysis in routine. What is the difference between a reference and a control material? A reference material is a certified material issued by an accredited producer, ensuring a traceability of the sample. The control material is usually left over after a proficiency testing and has an assigned value that is usually determined with confirmatory method. So you can choose if you want to have a reference or a control material to be used in routine. But how can you, what is important when you choose this sample for your routine analysis? First, it's very important to have a comparable composition to the routine samples. For example, if you usually analyze mycotoxins in wheat at your site, then it's a good practice to choose as a material wheat again and not corn, for example. Then we recommend to prefer naturally contaminated materials that are commercially available and produced by specialized companies. These materials have a known concentration, which is calculated, for example, with a reference method or a proficiency testing scheme. It might have a given acceptability range, and it might be stable. This is also very important, and also the storage conditions of your reference or control material must be adequate, especially for mycotoxins. As you probably know, if you don't follow the right storage conditions, molds can continue growing, keep on growing, and so the level of contamination might increase over time. Once that you have chosen your material to be used in routine, then you have to extract it in parallel with your routine samples and run it in replicate to evaluate the accuracy and the precision of the method. And after that, simply plot the dosage of the material over time. This allows you to obtain what is called the control chart, which is also a very useful tool. We will go in the next few slides into detail with this. Just a word about the fact that sometimes the laboratory might need to make some adjustments because some satisfactory ranges, for example, are too wide for the laboratory need. Or also, sometimes the kit manufacturer claims might be stricter. So the analyst might have the necessity to make some adjustments in terms of parameters with the given material. This is an example of the control chart. So as you can see here, the analyst has to report on each day of analysis the results obtained in terms of dosage, to calculate the average, the standard deviation, and the intra-assay precision in terms of coefficient of variation. As you can see here, this is a quite good result because the reference material or control material is giving reproducible results over time. So we always recommend when building a control chart to choose more than one material. As you can see here we propose 3 different control materials. And also what we recommend our customers is to replace a material which is going near to the end, such as material number 1 in this example, before it's finished. So in this case, for example, you can see here that material number 3 has been introduced at this stage. So when material number 1 is still available, this can help in evaluating the results obtained with material number 2, being sure that the kit is still working properly. And also this control chart is a very useful tool to evaluate, for example, a kit batch change, because you can compare the results obtained with the previous kit lot and those obtained after the change. So let's have a look at 2 specific examples. In the first one, this is the demonstration that having more than one material is essential, because in this case, as you can see here, from this point on, you are starting to observe some, let's say, strange results in material number 1. But as you have also the opportunity to evaluate the results of material number 2 and material number 3, you can exclude that these aberrant results are due to the kit. So this is a very essential point, in my opinion. Having more than one material is useful to understand whether the kit is still working properly. So in this case, we can conclude that is the sample that is aberrant, not the kit lot itself. At this, on this plot, on the other side, you can see that having more than one material can also be useful to catch aberrant sessions. So in this case, you can see that all these three materials are underestimated. So it's a clear example of an aberrant analytical session. You don't have to trust this analysis. The internal quality control does not provide, however, a comparison with external laboratories. To do so, you have to plan your external quality assurance. This is a tool that allows for the comparison of your results to a source outside your laboratory, which might be a peer group of laboratories, for example, or a reference laboratory. There are many types of external quality assurance. The rechecking or retesting by a reference laboratory of your samples that you have already analyzed at your site. However, this is not very used in our field because, as you know, methanolic extracts are usually not very stable over time. So usually the preferred option, let's say, for mycotoxins is the proficiency testing option. This is an interlaboratory scheme arranged by a professional provider. And the third option is the on-site evaluation, which is usually done when it's difficult to apply the other two strategies. So what are the main features of proficiency testing? The ISO guide specifies that the proficiency testing schemes are interlaboratory comparison organized regularly across the year to test the performance of the laboratories and also the competence of the analyst. It's done by giving blind samples to the participants, and then the results are collected and analyzed in a report that discloses the assigned value of the material and provides also each participant with a score. This score is the so-called z-score, which is the values relationship to the assigned value. This value could be determined, could be related to the collected results among participants, or can be assigned by the provider on the basis of a confirmatory method, for example. Usually acceptable z-score is less or equal to 2. The performances can be compared with other ELISA methods or with instrumental analysis. This tool, the attendance to the proficiency testing program, is a cost-efficient way to challenge your routine and also to compare with an external laboratory. So what are our take-home messages? We recommend to run at least one proficiency test per year, if possible. Reconstitute samples following the provider prescription, but remember to treat them, to extract them with your routine procedure. And also, it's a good practice to include in the analysis some reference materials to guide the analyst in evaluating the session compliancy and also in understanding whether it is necessary to repeat the analysis. And finally, it's always a good practice to exploit proficiency testing also to double check new technicians, for example, new equipment and new batches.
So thank you, Julia, for your contribution. Before to move on, we collect the one quick questions for Julia. So the question is, can we pull together standards of different boxes of one same batch?
standard of different boxes of same kit batch? Well, you have to pay attention at the lot number which is printed on the standard bottle. But I would say that if the lot number of the standards is the same, you can, of course, use them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we can move on. And so let's us move to the final topic of today's webinar that deals with the automatic implementation of screening methods. In other words, how to verify and validate a protocol for analyzing robots. Francesca Bravin has been part of Eurofins Tecna team since 2015. She worked for 5 years in our research laboratory, developing and validating both ELISA test kits and novel multi-analyte ELISA spotted-based technologies. Published with the Queen's University of Belfast. Recently, she drove the project of applying Eurofins technologies kits on the corporate automatic analyzer, and she is in charge for heading the technical assistance team. So, Francesca, when you're ready, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Evelina. In the last hour and a half, we have discussed about the importance and benefit of using ELISA as mycotoxin screening method. ELISA is a simple laboratory technique that we can use to analyze a high number of samples in the same time. But this solution has some risky points. In general, ELISA has different steps that have to be run by an operator with experience for having reliable results. Moreover, the technician needs to do a high number of repetitive operations, so it is a full-time work. The automation can help to solve the critical points that are present in manual procedure. If the technician has to run a high number of samples, a robot can reduce the pressure of operators that have not to do the repetitive dispensation as manual procedure. Additionally, the robot is able to run ELISA with standardized conditions, and the performance are better than manual analysis. Eurofins Technologies' automatic solution doesn't need disposable tips, so help to saving consumable. Please consider that not all the robot works in this way. We choose this machine for many reasons, and one was to reduce the waste of plastic. Finally, in this particular period, the robot supports the social distancing lab. When the technician presses the button Start, the robot manages the ELISA analysis in an independent way, and the operator can walk away. Using an automatic ELISA solution gives to the technician the possibility to follow a mix and match approach. For instance, Eurofins Tecna has developed a product line for the detection of mycotoxins with a common methanol extraction procedure for all tests. The technician has to load only one extract that can be used for different kits running by the robot. Another important point is the mistake and mismatches reduction, because this software has a simple end-user interface that guides the technician to avoid errors. As I said before, the performance is standardized, and the technician needs a quick and simple education to use the robot. The last but not least advantage of the robot is the possibility to run multiplex analysis. The technician can program an analytical session with methods for searching different analytes and share the same sample. The automation offers 100% of flexibility, and the analytical needs of the customer are easily set up. The Eurofin Technologies automatic solution for ELISA is the Bolt. As you can see in the picture, is a compact and small machine. I present in detail the characteristics of the robot because it is important to underline that it is an open system, so the customer could program and run idly every test that he wants. It is a one-plate system, so it can run 96 determinations. It has a pre-dilution plate for kits that require this step. It is able to run up to 4 compatible methods for mycotoxin, but the maximum number depends on the kit and the shareable reagents. The robot has an ELISA immunoassay reader, but it's possible to have also a chemiluminescence reader. The machine is able to do all the classical steps of ELISA assay, in particular dilutions, dispensation, incubation, and washing step. The robot can shake or eat the microtiter plate separately or in combo. The more common wavelengths are available. For our kits, we use, for instance, 450 nanometers. The robot releases a final report that can be saved in PDF format. The final report contains the final result that can be elaborated by different algorithms. For instance, point-to-point, linear regression, cubic spline, 5 or 4 parameters, and other. There are a lot of options. The robot has a dedicated PC with pre-installed software for creating and managing the methods. By technical point of view, the analytical workflow in routine analysis is simple. The operator has to prepare manually the samples following the kit instruction. Later, it is important to select the desired test or tests and select the samples that has been run for each specific kit. Then the technician, following the schematic instruction present in the robot software, has to load the sample and reagent in specific positions. At the end, the technician has to press the start button and can walk away. The robot calculates the time needed to run the analytical session, so the operator knows exactly when he will have the final results report. The final report is automatically saved and always available for future evaluation. Eurofin Technologies can provide a high number of automatic methods for different kits. For mycotoxins analysis, Eurofin Techna has developed 8 validated methods. Briefly, I would like to explain how the methods that we have were created. The Test Designer software is an application that permits to write all the single steps of the method, including the speed of aspiration or dispensation of each liquid. Following the kit instruction, a first version of the method is written. The method is tried with a real kit and quality control sample. If the verification is compliant to the kit insert specification, the method can be considered final. If the verification is not compliant, the method has to be adjusted until it is compliant to all parameters. The final version of the method is validated following the validation scheme described in the slide. First, it is important to evaluate the calibration curve compliancy. The curve has to be compliant with the kit insert specification and comparable with the manual curve. Second step is to evaluate the absence of cross-contamination. This is done using a high contaminated sample and blank sample that are random loaded. This is important for checking the efficiency of probe washing. Third step is to confirm the absence of drift effect. The Bolt is a single probe robot, so each well is separately treated. This reduces the drift effect, but it is better to evaluate also with a real test that the drift isn't present. Fourth step is the confirmation of accuracy and precision observed in manual tests. Reference or control materials are run in triplicates for at least 3 independent analytical sessions. Fifth step is to evaluate the routine run. A high number of real samples are testing for doing a stress verification on the robot. I would like to show you the validation study that we did for ice cream Afla M1 milk. This kit is used for the detection of aflatoxin M1 in milk sample. It's AOAC validated ELISA kit, and a huge number of Italian customers use that kit for routine analysis. We decided to give them all the possible solutions, including the possibility to run automatically the tests on Bolt. The method, as I said before, was written following the kit instruction. The first step is to pipette 100 microliter of standard N samples in the reactive plate and incubate 45 minutes. These steps are the same of manual procedure. The washing steps that usually are done with a squeeze button were optimized in the robot method for having the same efficiency of manual washing. After that, 100 microliter of enzyme conjugate is pipetted in incubate 15 minutes. The washing steps are also in this case optimized. Indeed, the volume dispensed in the well is higher respect to previous washing. Later, 100 microliter of developing solution is pipetted and incubate 15 minutes. The stop solution is added to fix the chromogen reaction. The developed plate was read automatically by the integrate reader. The method was tried following the validation scheme that I described above. We ran the tests manually and with 2 instruments. These were useful to demonstrate how much the automation is robustness if the method is correctly set. We ran the tests and verified the assay compliancy. As you can see, the mean of absorbance of standard 0 nanogram per liter, the B over B0 at 50% of inhibition, and the mean of CV of standard were always compliant. An important thing is that the standard deviation of absorbance obtained with the robot is lower than manual in all cases. This confirms that the performance can be standardized and can be better than manual. In the graph, you can see the calibration curves obtained during the study. In blue, the curve obtained with robot implementation, and in orange, the manual implementation. The second step of validation protocol was to verify the absence of cross-contamination. We use a sample at 175 nanogram per liter as a contaminated sample, a medium contaminated sample at 50 nanogram per liter, and a blank sample. In this slide, you can see the experimental scheme. In the graph below, the dots represented the B0% of all determinations. As you can see, the B0 of blank sample are the same for all replicates, and it is all out of the measuring range. This confirms the absence of cross-contamination. The third step of validation protocol was to verify the absence of drift test. We use reference material are at 50 nanogram per liter. That is the European limit for aflatoxin M1. You can see in milk. You can see the experimental scheme. In the graph is represented the dose of the replicates of the samples. As you can see, the linearity showed that the drift effect wasn't detected. One of the most important steps is the evaluation of accuracy and precision of reference quality control material and on spike sample. The data collected in this study were comparable with the manual AOAC validated kit. The spike samples were distributed in the measuring range, and the mean of recovery for fortified determination was accurate for whole milk, but also for defected milk. The performance on power milk were also accurate and precise. The ice cream AFLA M1 milk method was tested also in the routine analysis. 553 raw whole bovine milk were run. During this stress test of the machine, a proper cleaning procedure was set to avoid that the fat of the milk clogs the tube of probe. An interesting thing is that we calculated that the using of Bolt in routine analysis has permitted to save 1,000 tips and 20 hours of technician work that was spent to do other projects. One recommendation that emerged during routine analysis is to use regularly a control material to monitor the machine and analysis during the time. This sample or samples have to be inserted regularly in routine. For instance, after a determined number of analytical sessions or every week. This is a customer decision, but it's important to have a quality control material to check that all is work at standard level. In conclusion, for selecting the best solution of screening for you, it's important to list the requirements to define the ideal screening tool. Read critically the manuals and the validation reports to learn how sensitivity, specificity, accuracy, precision was assessed. Plan your own validation, calculating the need resources, the time, and the material. Record all your data. Keep monitoring the assay execution by means of a control chart, regular participation to proficiency test, and use of control material in routine. It's important for manual, but also for automated execution. And evaluate an automatic analyzer as a clever investment throughout traceability, workload reduction, error reduction, multiplexing, and standardization. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you, Francesca, for the last part of the speech. And now we would like to start with some questions that were collected here during the talks. So the first one, I think it's for Francesca. His Eurofins technologies giving other kits validated on the Bolt?
Yes, all the method that Eurofin technologies provide are validated on the Bolt, and the validation protocol is the protocol that I described during the speech.
Yes, they're meaning also if there are maybe other kits from other lines, probably.
Yeah, Would you like to know the list? We have mycotoxins, but also woody are kits from Eurofin Tecna. On the Bolt, there are also allergens. And this is the two big groups that we have validated.
Perfect, thank you. So in this case, this automatic analyzer could be used also for cross-analysis for common matrices. Thanks to be part of this network of multinational companies. So another question more is regarding the lateral flow devices. And this is, I think, for Giulia Rosa. So let's read it. When will census strip lateral flow tests for mycotoxins be traded?
Sorry, I was
Hi,
still
Giulia.
muted.
Okay, this
So
is
the
a
strip,
very long. This is a long question.
very normal. Yes, yes, yes. We were very nice until the end, but now I was muting and I was speaking, obviously.
Perfect.
So
Please go on.
the novel strips, the lateral flow platform is currently under development in our R&D team. So we have focused this presentation speaking mostly about ELISA. That is what we already have available, but we count to release them soon. Obviously, we want to provide some benefits and some novel aspects also on the strips, and not to release just the another group of strips that works on mycotoxin. So we are still in R&D optimization phase.
Yes. Then there are asking us as other more technical details, as assume. So how to read the results of lateral flow tests for mycotoxins? If is there any kind of instrument to read the results, and if it does qualitatively or quantitative reading and reports results?
The census strip platform is going to be read through a reader, a corporate reader. That means that we aim to have one reading system, fully portable, standalone, that is going to host also strips from our sister's company, able to read also the strip of allergens, glyphosate, and GMO. So with this instrument, you will be able to run several different types of tests, and the result will be quantitative for mycotoxins. Nevertheless, I don't exclude that we will be able also to provide some qualitative visual interpretation-based strip. I know that some regions and the world still demand for such kind of devices. So the census strip will be quantitative and read digitally with a reader, and we're thinking to a qualitative option.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Then we can move on to other few questions since we are running out of time. So the next one it will be regarding the materials. So probably with Giulia Runti, we can also have an answer. So if you can also switch on your microphone in case. Could you explain again the difference between the reference control and control material, and when to choose one over the other as internal quality control?
Sure. So the reference materials are certified materials. So materials that come with a document, let's say, issued by an accredited producer. So materials with a traceability, with everything written on this document. while the control materials are usually left over after a proficiency test. So the assigned value in this case derives from the quantitative results obtained with a confirmatory instrumental method. When you have to choose your material, sometimes it also depends on the type of matrix you're working with, because for some kind of matrices, it's not so easy to find a reference material, for instance. So this is also something that has to taken into account when choosing a material. The availability of the matrix sometimes is simply a matter of availability, I would say.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question, always for you, since you are ready. In the
Please.
external in the external quality assurance, what's the better way to examine our competence of the laboratory?
I would say the proficiency testing scheme. If possible, if the laboratory has this opportunity, try to attend at least one proficiency test per year. Then for sure there are some providers offering also more than one, sometimes 3 or 4 different proficiency testing over years. So I would say this is the best option, to attend at least one, if possible more than one, in order to monitor the performances over time.
Perfect. Thank you for the clear answer. And yes, since we have very few minutes, we will read the last. That I think it will be for Julia Rosser. So it's regarding about the cost of the equipment for the automation of the Helasa analysis, and in case if also this equipment can cover the LC-MS preparations.
I think we are referring to the Bolt.
Yeah.
The Bolt is not an automatic sample preparator, so it's not something we can combine with LC-MS analysis. And also for the ELISA, the sample preparation is still in the hands of the operator. Luckily, we invested in the simplifying the sample preparation for mycotoxins in vegetal commodities, as we have one that is in common for dawn, aflatoxin, T2, okra, and so on. So the same extract has to be prepared manually and then loaded on the machine. And also for aflatoxin M1, we do not have sample preparation, so almost everybody can load the milk as it is directly in the automatic analyzer. But it is an ELISA automatic analyzer. It is not something we can connect to LC-MS. Regarding price, the answer is obvious. It depends. And the sense that Eurofins Technologies is really putting an effort in simplifying the life of laboratories, of industries, and so on. So we really try to customize our offers to the needs of our customers. Sometimes we are able also to offer rentals and free loans depending on kits volume. So it really depends. It's not a huge investment. We could say more or less that it could be 4 or 5 times the investment of a reader, of a good ELISA reader. But this again depends really on the condition that we discuss together with the customer. Once we investigate what is the real need, it's not a big investment.
Perfect. Thank you, Julia, for this answer. I believe that the time is running out. So for those questions we were not able to answer today, we will reaching you out in the upcoming days, since you left the email addresses when you registered to participate to this webinar.
Thank you, Evelina. Thank you for having chaired this very long session, 2 hours. Thank you, Julia and Francesca, for the topics you raised and reported. I honestly don't believe that we were able to deep dive into all the aspects in just 2 hours. Many points can be then furtherly discussed with you and for all those that are still interested. I wish you all a very good rest of the day. Thank you a lot for joining us, for joining Eurofins Technologies. Have a nice day.
Bye. Thank you.